I'm joined today by Kartik Kini of Finite Reflections, and we're going to be talking about Twin Cop, which is out now. Before we even get going, I'll say there is a link down below. So if any of what you're about to hear about or see piques your interest, go check it out. Kartik, thank you for taking the time to talk with us today.
Oh, thank you for inviting me for this interview.
Yes, I'm happy to talk to you. We had a couple other devs we talked to mention Twin Cup and put it on our radar. So I'm excited to kind of see the story behind the game. Before we begin, why don't you give a pitch for Twin Cop for any people listening to this interview that haven't heard about it?
So yeah, Twin Cop is a co-op twin-stick shooter where both players control the same person. We've been billing it as the most cooperative game ever due to the fact that it's impossible really to play by yourself, which we can talk a little bit more about later. We added a single-player mode, but that's a different conversation topic. But that's the general pitch. It's a two-player game where both players control the same person. It's the aesthetic is very 80s top-down Hotline Miami-esque, and that's about it. Yeah.
Yeah, great summary. I have to ask, first question. As soon as people started talking to me about Twin Cop, I had this question for my bird. So where did this idea come from? There has to be a good story behind where having this like Frankenstein monster, two-person, one cop adventure that two people go on together. It has to have something interesting behind it.
Yeah, we actually came up with the idea at the Global Game Jam from the year 2016, so a little while ago, and the theme for that year was waves, and we wanted to stretch the theme out a little bit, and we came up with, all right, so because like a lot of our friends were talking about, oh, we're going to do a wave shooter, oh, we're going to do something with like ocean waves, and we were like, well, what else works with wavelength? What if we did a game where two players have to be on the same wavelength? Aha, a co-op game. And I'd like never really made, I'll take it back. I made a co-op game in college before, but I'd never really made like a true co-op adventure game before, and I really wanted to try that. So we were talking it over. It just so happened that that year Global Games Jam was on my birthday, so we went out for drinks for my birthday. Like they announced the theme, and we immediately were like, "All right, peace, we're gonna go get some drinks," and and so we were hanging out and just talking.
A good decision, to get the inventive juices going.
Definitely. I think I won't lie, that probably played a role in the kind of out there idea that we ended up coming up with. But yeah, no, we were just out talking about it. We knew from there, like, all right, that's how we're going to interpret the theme. Now, how do we come up with a cool and compelling co-op game? And so normally I approach things very mechanics first, but this was one of the few games where one of the members of my team, Garrett, he just, we were talking like he was taking it from the story perspective. He's like, all right, but why is this game so cooperative? Like, what is the story reason for this being so cooperative? And he just randomly spouted this gorgeous monologue. He was like, John and Will were the best cops in the Twin Cities area until a terrible pontoon boat accident nearly killed them. And he just went on, and then he's like, and then we saved their bodies, put them into one body, and now they're Twin Cop. And we were just like, that was amazing.
Where did this come from, and how did you make it?
And that was it, basically. Like, he said that, and then after that, we went right back to the jam site, and we recorded Garrett do that voiceover in that sort of like epic voice that he had, and we also recorded a couple different takes of him just saying Twin Cop, and different sort of intonations, and we ended up using that in like the main menu when you launch the game for the first time, and the Twin Cop titles hits in, like that's Garrett just saying Twin Cop. Like, I think we might be still using the same take we did the game jam because it was just so like regal and epic when he first said it. Yeah, I guess that's the story of how Twin Cop came to be. We made it at the game jam. At the jam, it was a super simple like wave-based endless game where you just sort of kept fighting increasing amounts of enemies that kept attacking you, and then after that, after the game jam, we took it to our first conference, which was IndieBits in South Carolina, Columbia, North Carolina, forget. Anyways, we took it there, and like everyone who saw it just came by. They're like, "Wow, this is so much fun!" And they kept coming back to see it again and again. And so we were like, maybe we should expand on and do a little bit more than just an endless arcade mode. And so then we came up with a whole story and adventure mode that is the primary mode now.
Awesome. Yeah, it's great to see games come out of game jams. In covering as many indie games as we have, I often see game jams create some of the best ideas. You know, that kind of
Yeah.
pressure. It's awesome. One of the other things that really captured my attention in kind of having all these other people pitch Twin Cop to me as a game to follow up on, is that it's not just a twin stick shooter.
Mhm.
There's been other games that are cooperative where people are controlling multiple guns or something with a twin stick, but you've also worked in all these other like mini games, which are, you know, some of them are very typically mini game, like, oh, like defuse a bomb, but others are like walking, which is hard when you're two different people. Where did that come from? Was that something that you grabbed onto early as working in these other mini games, or is it something that kind of happened naturally as you progressed?
Yeah, so I think one of the key things that really drove these kind of moments in the game to happen was at the jam when we were designing the jam version, and this is something that I'd never really done before this project, was we established like a hard design pillar. We were like, all right, here's a rule we're going to set for this game and for everything that we designed for this game, and we're not allowed to break this rule when doing anything in this game. And that rule was everything must be cooperative. And so when I started, so we said that, and at the time I was like, should be easy enough. Like, you know, everything's gonna be cooperative. Fine, whatever. And we started like coding the movement, and then while we were like getting like enemy and combat to start working, we realized, oh hey, when you take damage, how are you gonna get healed? And I was like, oh, I mean, you know, whatever. Enemies will drop health packs or something. You know, that's what most games do. And then my co-developer Eric was like, hold on, no, we said everything must be cooperative. Remember? And I was like, you're right. So how do you heal cooperatively? And then we were like, well, you have to move together to heal. That's cooperative and encourages a certain style of gameplay, which is a little different. And so from there, like every decision that came afterwards was like, okay, so then for what you like mentioned, like defusing bombs, we knew we wanted to do some sort of things in the game that sort of switched up the gameplay on a regular basis. And so one of the first things that we came up with was like a bomb defusal minigame. And how do you do that cooperatively? Well, I mean, all you do is hold scissors in one hand. And you're like, what if the scissors are really big and you hold it with two hands and you do it like this, like garden shears for some absurd reason? And yeah, I mean, that was kind of it. Like after we came up with that one idea, which I believe was after the game jam, after we came up with the bomb defuse minigame, we just continued sort of everywhere where the story went, we kept saying, okay, now you have to cross a street. That's cooperative because you're already moving together and you have to like time when you're going to cross the street and not get hit by cars. And then we came up across, I'm trying to think off the top of my head. Oh, then driving is like you have a driving minigame. Like, how do you drive cooperatively? Oh, you only control the wheels on your side of the car. So that was it. That's basically like we took some relatively non-novel concepts in terms of minigames, in terms of gameplay, and made them novel by applying our design pillar to it and saying, make that cooperative. Make that one thing that people have seen before in other games. Make it stupid cooperative.
That's cool. You mentioned earlier as something to bring up later, which I'm glad you did, because I do want to talk about the fact that this game is so cooperative. How has that affected kind of selling the game? And was it a challenge in showing it off? I mean, I assume a cooperative game like this actually shows pretty well at shows. But then you have the issue of somebody buying it can't really just buy them for themselves.
Yeah, so I think we were definitely victim to, and I wish I could remember what it's called. I feel like I've heard another developer mention this to me before, but there's like this effect. I don't know what I heard this other thing called as, but an effect where couch co-op games or games that you play with friends show disproportionately better at cons than they do in terms of like actual sales, and in terms of like they sort of create this false pretense in your mind of like, oh wow, this game is great, it's amazing because everyone loves it, when in reality it is partially affected by just the fact that when people go to cons and they suddenly see a game that they can sit down with their friend and play, there's a different atmosphere there, there's a different energy there that kind of contributes to your own perception of how good your game is. Now that's not to say that, like, you know, oh, if you're making a couch co-op game, don't trust people who are having fun with your game. If they're having fun, that's great. That means you have something good on your hands. But it also does mean, like, take it with a slight grain of salt with that, especially, like, if you go to a con and you go to sit down and play this one game, sit down and play this one game, and your friend's sitting over your shoulder and you're talking about it, and it's fun and it's interesting, then all of a sudden you sit down, there's this co-op game or this competitive game, and you're playing together, like, you get naturally more excited and more sort of happy about it. So I guess to your point, yes, it's been definitely a challenge selling it not at cons. Whenever I would meet with like a marketing team or something like that, or meet with potential publishers. We ended up self-publishing for some relatively personal reasons, but we were just like, whenever we met with other people and tried to pitch them on the game, they were always like, wow, that sounds great. Now, how are you going to sell that? Because it's co-op only, and it requires controllers. And I was like, yeah, I don't know. But one of my friends, who I believe you interviewed as well, Robert Waller, he's been a really good sort of developer friend who I talk to and hang out with a lot, and he gave me some really good advice where he was just like, look, I know it's completely against like all your design intentions and everything, but seriously consider putting in a single player mode. I think there are ways that you could do it, and he gave some really good ideas about how I could do it and still be true to the kind of game that Twin Cop is. So we ended up, after GDC this year, like fairly recently, we implemented two single player modes. Actually, one which is called robot mode, where we simulate the other player's inputs. So I coded like this very simple AI that's just like, when you try to play the game, I coded an AI that's just pretending to be a co-op partner that you can't see, that is trying to mimic the inputs of what a co-op partner would do. So at times, it's like super in sync with you, and at times, it's fighting you. And that kind of stimulates the feeling of playing with someone else, but it's obviously not the true experience. Sure. Similarly, the other version that I added was the control it all mode, which is this sort of like, the intent of it was twofold. One, I wanted to make a mode which is possible to play if you have only one controller, so you can hold like half in one hand and the other person holds the other half.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
So I literally took all the controls of Twin Cop and placed it onto one controller on one half and the other half like that. And that kind of results in this intentionally finger-breaking situation where you're just like, I gotta control everything at once with it. So yeah, we ended up adding that, and I think it helped. After the launch, I had a couple people message me and say like, hey, I've been excited about this game, I wanted to buy it, but I didn't have anyone to play with like on launch day, but I did want to help you out and leave a review, so I bought it, and then I was surprised that, hey, there was single player mode, and I played through a decent chunk of the campaign, and I enjoyed it, and I was like, oh, cool. I didn't expect, I had this fear that I was going to release that single player mode, someone was going to download it, play it, and be like, this game's not fun, and then I'd have to like be like, but you're not really playing it the way you're supposed to. Like, play with a friend. I promise it's a lot more fun that way. But I don't think that was an issue. I think having more options, allowing more people to be able to enjoy your game the way that they want to, even if you, the designer, don't necessarily agree with it, is it's a way I think it changed the way that I make games going forward for sure.
That's a really nice little nugget of wisdom that you just dropped there, I think. Hopefully people see that and take it to heart. And it's good to hear that. I imagine it must be really good to hear that taking this different direction than your original kind of goal paid off and did well. Like we said, Twin Cop's out now, so we'll have links down below if the gameplay you're seeing is capturing your attention. Moving from talking about kind of the background of the game and your design challenges, we'd love to know your story. So how did you get involved in making games?
Yeah, so I think like the earliest I remember getting into making games was in middle school, where my parents, I told my parents, like, my parents knew I was really into video games in general, and I told them, hey, I'm also interested in making video games, and they found this one tech camp called ID Tech Camps, and I went to that in middle school, and that was really what started like kicking off my like interest in how to make games. I started with like making really simple Flash games back in the explosion of Flash games era, and that was a lot of fun. And then I started, branching off into Java. At that time, like my middle school and even my high school, just they didn't have any coding classes, and I was like always super frustrated about that. So I would always just like I would get my classwork done as soon as possible. And I think for quite some time in high school, I just kind of like stopped playing video games for a little while and just started just focusing on trying to figure out how to make them. And all I really knew how to do at the time was Java. And so I started coding in Java text-based adventures because I didn't know yet how to do visuals for games. So I was just like, here, I'm going to code my own little Zork-like, and I'm going to code my little, like, whatever. And then JavaFX came around, and I was like, oh, cool. I already know Java, and I can use this new thing called JavaFX to, like, Swing, not JavaFX. I started using Swing in Java to start creating visuals for my games, but at that time, because I didn't know how to code performantly, all the stuff was running really slow. I was only able to do like very, very simple visual things. And then I got to college at Georgia Tech is where I went to school, and they had this excellent club called VGDev, which I joined my freshman year at college. The school in general and the major I chose was supposed to be more games focused, but I think the majority of what I learned in terms of games was from this one club and from my peers in that club. Because I joined and I told like one of the first projects that I joined in that club, like, hey, I don't really know anything about Unity or how to like make games. And he was like, oh, that's fine. That's how this club works. What do you want to do? And I like looked at this game that this guy was making, and I was like, well, it looks like you don't have UI yet. Maybe I could figure that out. And then he was like, sure, here you go. You are now the UI designer. And I was like, what? Oh, okay. And this was before. Yeah, this was before Unity had their old UI editor, so I had to code all the UI in one function called onGUI, which if you're a relatively older Unity user, you may recognize like, wow, that was some dark times for us, but that was a good sort of like, I literally got thrown into the deep end of the pool there and had to figure it out because we had like 3 months to finish this game and show it at this campus showcase. And I didn't know how to do anything, and the lead of this project was just like, well, we better have UI, so figure it out. And I was like, I guess okay, and I managed to figure it out.
That's certainly one way to learn. That's a deep end experience for sure.
I figured that out, and then I joined a couple of other projects. I became known as the UI guy at this club because of the fact that I jumped in and no one else was trying it at the time, and I was just like, I guess I'll figure it out. And then after, like, I think my sophomore year of college, I started leading my own projects, and just sort of like that was when I started dipping my toes into game design and art. Like, I'd never really done too much 3D modeling before, so I was like, I want to figure it all out because I enjoy every little bit of the process, and that's kind of the indie experience for most people, I'm sure. So
yeah,
that was kind of it. After that, it just sort of kept going, and then my senior year of college was 2016, and that's when we did this game jam. So
right on. You mentioned you had kind of played games forever. Are there any games that stick out in your memory that were kind of those linchpin games, those inspirations that made you want to make games?
The first like console I was ever allowed to have was GameCube, and I remember just playing the heck out of so much Super Mario Sunshine. I think that was one of those games that, and I played some games before then, like my family had a PC desktop, and I played a couple of like RPGs on there and stuff. Like I remember really loving Morrowind as well, but I think it wasn't until I played Sunshine that really made me realize like how like tactile games could be, and how like, because like I'd also played Mario 64 too, but it was just something about that game, something about the visuals and the fidelity of the way that you could control Mario and be able to do all these cool backflips and tricks and stuff, and then added on top of that the really, really beautifully rendered environment of that game was just like a huge inspiration to me in terms of like picking an aesthetic and going 200% in that direction. And I hope that also shows in Twin Cop, where I was like, all right, 80s, 200% 80s. And I intend to do that going forward as well. Like whatever game we do next and whatever games we continue to do, I'm a big fan of just like take an idea and go so far down that road that you can't even see where you came from anymore. It's just so yeah, if I had to pick one game, it's hard to, but if I had to, it'd be Sunshine, I think.
Well, awesome. And final question we ask every dev we talk to: what other indie projects, indie games out there have caught your attention as a person that makes games?
Man, so many. I think, especially now that as we were starting to wrap up Twin Cup, and now that Twin Cup's launched, I've been sort of diving back into my Steam backlog of tons of indie games that I've been playing lately. I'm actually gonna like pull up Steam secretly over here. I was gonna peek at what I've been playing lately. I've been really loving Forager. Really cute and visually pleasing game. Risk of Rain 2, of course. Plenty of people are psyched about that game right now. I've been loving that as well. But I think I've also been focusing more on the kind of games that got me into gaming and got me into game development, like Sunshine. So, for instance, I went back and finally played A Hat in Time, and I just really love like everything about the aesthetic of that. But I'm also trying to get better at pixel art, so I played some Moonlighter because I really love the pixel art in Moonlighter and Owlboy. So I like honestly nothing like super new I've played. Well, I take it back. Wandersong. Wandersong is a new game that I played that I was like, this is genius.
Wandersong was my game of the year last year.
That is so well deserved. Because it's just great. I feel like I could go on about that game. And then let's see what else. My girlfriend's been making me play Dragon Age Origins. I never played that, so I went back and played that for a little while.
Well, that's a good spread of indies to kind of be re-diving into the actual world of playing games. I mean, we hear that a lot talking to devs because we're normally interviewing them as they're releasing or as they have just released a game, and they're like, "What play games? What is this play games?" So hopefully you get to enjoy the time to actually dive back in and play those. Kartik, thank you for taking the time to talk to us about Twin Cop and kind of the story of the game and the design decisions behind it. There are links below if you have liked any of the video that you've seen of the game. Please check it out, maybe with a friend. And thank you again.
Thank you.